And this is, again, another completely different topic. And the topic here is break one, break them all. And we're going to be talking about the law in this. And so we have a couple quotes here to start us off. And the first one comes from James 2, 9 through 11. And it says, "But if you show partiality, you are sinning, and you are reproved by the law as violators against the law. For whoever keeps the whole written law and slips in one thing, he is condemned by the entire law. For he who said, 'Do not commit adultery,' also said, 'You shall not murder.' But if you are not committing adultery, but you have murdered, you have become a violator of the law." And the other quote that I have comes from Galatians. Remember, the Galatian church was having some troubles. Um, but I testify again to every person who is circumcised that he is obligated to observe all of the law. So what we see in both of these is that there is a singleness to the law. There is an all aspect to the law. In one place, we see the entire law mentioned. Get my pointer out. We see entire law. So it says if you slip in one thing, you are condemned by the entire law. And so what we see here is this idea that if you break one part of the law, you've actually broken the entire law and you are condemned by the entire law. And we'll dig into that some more. But I want you to see a couple things here. He says, if you show partiality, you are sinning. Well, what kind of sin is that? He talks about two different things. He talks about adultery, and he also talks about murder. And we'll see how that makes sense in just a little bit here. And then in the last passage here, he talks about all of the law here. And we see again up here the whole written law and condemned by the entire law. So that's this combination of things we'll look at in this really short study. This is only 3 slides, I think. So what is it about favoritism that breaks the law, and what law are we breaking? And so James actually hints at that when he talks about those two different commandments. He shows us that it is murder, but he doesn't explain why. But a long time ago, you may remember that I did a long set of talks on the 10 Commandments, and we talked about what murder was. And what murder really is, as a commandment, is diminishing the value of someone within yourself. And so you can kill someone within yourself without, so there's no bloodshed in physical reality. It's only within yourself that you've killed someone. And that's what the real murder commandment is at its heart. It's about that. It's not just about stabbing somebody. And so in that way, favoritism, which is treating one person differently than you treat another person, and that's what was going on. Maybe I should back up a little bit and explain the situation that was going on in the church that James is talking to. They've started treating people differently. The people who have fancy clothes and fancy rings, they are given better seats to sit in. But the people who don't have those things are told, "Oh, just sit on the floor over there." And so they're treating people differently based on physical attributes and wealth. And so that's the way the world sees things. The world says, well, I'll treat this rich man better and maybe it will benefit me, but this person over here who doesn't have any money or anything to him, I won't treat him special because he can't benefit me. So that worldly thinking is the other part of the problem. That's the adultery part that James is hinting at here. Chasing after another God, which is chasing after the world's values and understanding the world through those values. So James' real points here are that breaking one law is no different from breaking another law. So if you break the law on adultery, that's the same, or it's not any different from breaking the law on murder. Neither one is better. Neither one is worse. You've broken the law, and you've broken the entirety of the law. And so breaking one law is breaking them all. And so his point here is that even something you might think of as very small, like favoritism, is breaking the law in the same way, and the entirety of the law falls on you because of that. And so um, there are no small commandments, is kind of the summary of what James says. There aren't things that are less important than other things in the commandments. They're all commandments, and when you've broken one, you've broken all, and then the full weight of the law lands on you. And so the Bible's law is completely different from ours in the world here. It's not like our laws where we think the punishment should fit the crime. So if it's a small crime, it should have a small punishment. Like speeding is a fairly small thing, but doing something really reckless or gross speeding is a bigger thing, and so there's a bigger punishment for that. And then if it goes on to somebody actually killing somebody, it's a bigger punishment for that. So we think in worldly terms so much of the time about things being in degrees, and that's what James is really talking to this church about. He's saying, in doing this treatment of some people better, favoring some people over other people, you're doing what the world does. You're doing you're treating people the way the world values and treats people. And he says, because of that, you failed in this. And effectively, you are committing murder because you're diminishing the value of one person within yourself. And so our laws as human beings are necessarily different from God's laws, but God's laws are very different. And so with God's law, there's really only one law and there's really only one punishment. And so what we know, or I hope we know, is that God's laws are really representations of one big truth, that one big truth that God is and knows. And this is too big a thing. I've talked about this many times before, this idea that we can't fully understand this whole truth at one time. And so we can only understand bits and pieces of it at a time. So the Ten Commandments are those bits and pieces. And so the Ten Commandments are really applications of that one big truth. And therefore, they are 10 different ways of looking at that truth and trying to understand that central truth behind everything. And that's what God would like us to do. And I suspect that Adam and Eve, before the sin, understood that whole truth. And because they broke that, and because we are their children, we have no ability to understand that whole truth anymore. And so it's lost to us that way. So it's necessary for us to have written laws about like 10 commandments and understanding the depth of the 10 commandments. Those are the things that we have to live by. We can't understand that one big truth anymore. So what comes out of that is if you break any commandment, you've broken that truth. And so because the commandment is really just a window into that truth, you've broken the truth. And because you've broken the truth, you've broken all of the commandments that the truth is based on. And because of that, there's only one punishment. And the punishment is really a consequence, and it is the separation from God. You've made yourself ugly to God by what you've done, and so you need to repair that, clean up that ugliness. And so that one punishment is the same for everything, whether you've done something that you might see as small, such as just treating people differently and not murder, which you see as being a really bad thing. All of these things have the same consequence, which is the separation from God. And so what we see there is kind of a formidable level of law, things that we just can't live up to. And that's the truth. We can't live perfectly. And because we can't live perfectly to that truth that we can't really understand, we fail much and often, and we need forgiveness often. And so that's just a part of how we should expect our lives to be, is that we're going to fail, hopefully in smaller ways, and the Holy Spirit is going to purify us from those unintentional sins that we might commit. So that's really all I wanted to say on that one. Any questions on that one?
I think you can diminish the Sabbath by not really respecting it either. When you're talking about murder of the heart, for example, about people, it's when you diminish them in your heart because maybe you're thinking badly of them or want to get even or something. But it also holds true for the Sabbath, because if we trivialize it, don't make it seem like it's very important, then you've already are responsible for diminishing it in your heart. I mean, you're not going to change anything from it. But I believe that a lot of Sabbath-keeping churches are going in that direction, where they call it celebrating the Sabbath, or and just doing whatever they want to do. Once you do that, I think you've already diminished it and you've already broken it.
Yeah, that's true. And that applies also to the murder commandment. While it's possible to murder someone entirely within yourself and there wouldn't be any bloodshed or any other consequences physically, more than often there are. What's in your heart tends to come out through your actions. And so the murder inside of you doesn't always stay inside of you. Sometimes it comes out as really nasty words, or sometimes it comes out as an actual murder. And so the same thing with the Sabbath. If the Sabbath has less meaning to you and you've diminished it within yourself, ultimately that's going to result in the way you live your life, and you're going to turn away from the Sabbath eventually, and it won't have any time in your life because it has no purpose inside of you.